My name is Paul, and I'm an architect on Venafi's ecosystem team, responsible for helping enable developers who are building integrations between Venafi and the other products and applications and services that you are all familiar with. My role gives me the unique opportunity to engage with a variety of our customers and understand the motivations that drive the requests for integration between those applications and services, some of which your organizations are very likely using every day. So politics, you may be asking yourself. Everyone already knows this sage wisdom. You shouldn't mix business with things like religion and politics. While I agree, that's not quite what I'm talking about here. In this context, politics more refers to the friction between internal teams in an organization that often arises when one team dictates how another team must do their job. In almost all cases, both of those teams are working toward the same organizational outcome. They just differ slightly when it comes to the process by which that outcome is achieved. Different teams are responsible for different parts of the business, and so those teams might have different tools, different processes, and methods of interacting within the company. If a team owns something, whether that be a standalone process or an approval step in a larger process, or maybe a specific part of an application or workload, or perhaps the entire application stack, the fact remains that they are responsible. That's really the key word. If anything goes wrong, they're going to be first in line to explain what happened, determine exactly what went wrong, and identify possible solutions so that it doesn't happen again. One can understand why they might not want to give up control over any aspect of that thing, whatever it may be. They don't want to introduce any risk of additional teams or processes, even if those processes are automated, in controlling something that they own and are responsible for. It's this type of thinking that leads the organization and the structure within that organization to have these rigid processes and inflexible teams. It causes loads and loads of wasted time waiting for approvals that would be unnecessary with a better approach. And yes, internal politics. I'll give you a classic example. We've got the application team versus the InfoSec team. Both teams are working toward the outcome of secure application deployment. Secure applications protect both the organization and the end users of their products. So maintaining that security is something that both teams can and should agree on. Where things start to break down and those internal politics start to rise up is in the details of the joint approach. InfoSec needs to ensure that applications are developed and deployed securely using machine identities that are known and trusted by the organization. App teams, on the other hand, need those machine identities to be issued quickly so that their work isn't held up in bottlenecks and automated pipelines aren't blocked during deployments. And so in comes change control to try and save the day. What is change control, though? We hear it all the time, but do we really think about what it is or question why it's necessary in every situation? In this context, I'm referring to change control as the general process that teams follow when making updates to an IT environment. Perhaps you, as an individual, have a change that needs to be made to production. Maybe it's a code change to your application to enable a new feature or fix a bug. Maybe it's a configuration update to your firewall, or maybe something that we're all familiar with here. That application uses a machine identity, a TLS certificate, to secure traffic. And that machine identity is set to expire in a week. It's your responsibility to renew that identity, provision it out to the application server, and then ensure that any other teams that might need to be updated are. Maybe the network security team performs traffic inspection to that application. They also need the update to ensure that there are no gaps in that traffic visibility. And as we all know by now, malware and other threats love to hide in the encrypted traffic whenever possible. So you start planning to make the change. You think about which other teams need to be notified of that change to ensure their systems, processes, and workflows don't break. And how many approvals does this change request need? Who needs to make those approvals? And most importantly, how long is all this going to take? What are the negative consequences if this change doesn't occur in time? An ideal outcome to this situation is that you know exactly which other teams need to be notified of your change. You know who to request that approval from. That person is available and responsive and approves your request in a timely fashion. But what if they aren't responsive? Do you know the escalation path? Is that escalation manual? Do you have to recognize that your request is still pending and take your own action? Hopefully that part is automated. But you're still stuck waiting, but at least you don't have to monitor your requests and usher along the process manually. Finally, thankfully, the change request is approved and an outage to your application is prevented in the nick of time. Now, maybe you've got it actually a little bit better, and that entire process is automated using something like ServiceNow. All you have to do is submit a ticket and, of course, wait for the approval. Or is it those approvals? In all these situations, there's just too much room for error. Things will start to break down, and the result of that breakdown is going to be an outage. If you think your organization is immune to this, I'm sorry to say that you aren't. Even some of the top tech companies in the world can't get this right. Microsoft, Google, and Spotify have all experienced machine identity-based outages in the past couple of years. And you just start to think how many people that use those services were affected by that outage. What's the impact on the brand when that happens? And so what's the alternative? How can organizations ease that friction between teams? I'll say it again, both of these teams have the same goal, and that is protect the organization and the end users from malicious threats. They should not be at odds. When app teams are enabled to use the automation tools that they're already using every day, it allows information security to provide what we offer, or what we refer to as guided self-service. Essentially, what that means in this context is app teams are able to request as many machine identities as they need whenever they need them. And they don't have to wait for the typical approvals and change control windows because the process has already been tested and vetted and it works. In today's modern world, most teams are building applications, either for their own use internally or externally for their customers. All of those teams in the organization need to be enabled to get the machine identities they need to secure those applications. InfoSec can and should offer guided self-service to the rest of the company in such a way that gives other teams that flexibility and that freedom of choice to use the automation tools they prefer, while still maintaining observability and control of critical assets like machine identities. Proper architecture design for that self-service model and tested automation are critical. Architecture design should, again, enable your teams to accomplish their day-to-day activities without restriction. Providing teams the ability to self-serve allows them that flexibility, that freedom of choice that they're all craving. They can experiment with and continue improving their processes, which then lead to increased efficiency and more consistent, resilient infrastructure, all within the boundaries that align within security's best practices. And so with that consistency that they get comes the idea of this tested automation, which provides the organization confidence that any change within the self-service model is guaranteed to be non-breaking. All those opportunities where we saw outages in the previous slides for breakdowns to results are removed from the equation entirely. And so freedom of choice and flexibility for the individual results in happier teams throughout the organization. Allowing teams to experiment and improve their processes can lead to more efficient operations. Enabling collaboration between teams that were once at odds mitigates or removes that unnecessary friction. And offering teams this model of guided self-service using whatever automation tools they prefer eliminates the politics of change control. Because as we all know already, there's no room for politics in business. check out marketplace.venafi.com to see all the different ways you can think about tackling this problem using the tools, the services, the products, and the platforms that your teams are already using every day.